Ever wonder how a civilization, a whole culture, recorded its deepest beliefs before they had written history? Well, that's exactly what we're diving into today, the unseen, spiritual world of the ancient Philippines.
So that really is the big question, right? If there are no books, no written records, where do you even start looking for a culture's soul?
Well, it turns out the answers weren't in books because they were literally everywhere else, in the sun, in the trees, in the very air they breathed. Their whole worldview was tangled up in this deep spiritual connection to nature, a world just buzzing with unseen forces.
Okay, so to really get a handle on their world, we have to start where they did, with the spirits. This is the absolute key. If you understand this part, everything else just clicks into place.
So what we're really talking about here is something called non-material culture. And I absolutely love this analogy. It's not the pot itself that tells the story, it's the recipe inside the pot. It's the beliefs, the traditions, the values. That's the stuff that really defines a people.
And at the very heart of that recipe was this idea of animism. This is the belief that pretty much everything in nature, the sun, the trees, even the rocks, had a spirit. So you're not just living in an empty forest, you're living in a world crowded with spirits that you have to acknowledge and, worship.
And what's cool is that these spirits went by different names depending on where you were. Up in the Tagalog regions, they were called Anito, but if you traveled south to the Visayas, you'd hear people talking about the Diwata. This just shows you right away how diverse the culture was, even back then.
It's the same story with the spiritual leaders. You had the Catalanan in the Tagalog regions and the Babaylan down in the Visaya. These were the folks who could actually communicate with that unseen world.
And their job was absolutely crucial. Think about it. They were the mediators between the human world and the spirit world. They weren't just priests. They were more like spiritual diplomats, the bridge between ordinary people and the gods.
A lot of that mediation happened through rituals, like the Maganito. This was basically a direct line to the spirits. You'd make an offering of food, say some prayers, and in return you'd ask for a good harvest, or for protection, or maybe just a special wish. It was their beliefs made real, belief in action.
Okay, but it wasn't just about local nature spirits. Oh no. There was a whole pantheon of gods and goddesses, a whole divine family that governed pretty much every part of their lives. Let's meet them.
Right at the top of the pyramid, you have Bathala. He was the big guy, the supreme being, the creator of it all. He was considered the most powerful god, the one keeping the whole world in balance.
But Batsala wasn't running the show all by himself. Not even close. You had a whole team of deities. Look at this. From Idianale, the god of agriculture, all the way to Dian Masalanta, the god of love. There was a specific god for every single important part of life. It really shows you a world where nothing was left to chance.
And just like with the spirits, this pantheon wasn't the same everywhere you went. The Tagalogs might have prayed to Lakampakati for a good harvest, but over in Pangasinan, the god of war Apalaki was a major figure. Every region had its own set of divine protectors, which is just fascinating.
So with this incredible world of spirits and gods all around them, you have to wonder, what did they think happened when you died? What was their view on life, death, and what comes next?
This is the absolute core of it all. They believed the soul just keeps on going. Death wasn't the end of the line, it was just a transition, a journey. And that one simple, powerful idea is the reason behind all their elaborate funeral customs.
And this is where it gets really interesting. Their burial process actually had two stages. First came the primary burial, where the body was buried with tools and personal items, everything you'd need for the journey to the afterlife. But then, after a while, came the secondary burial. They would actually dig up the bones, clean them, and place them in these beautiful sacred jars. The most famous one, of course, being the incredible Manungal jar.
And their respect for the dead didn't stop there. They had really specific mourning traditions. There were different names for the mourning period depending on who died, a woman, a man, or a chief. And they had rituals like the Pasiam, a 9-day prayer for the soul that ended with a big feast. And for any modern Filipinos watching, that might sound pretty familiar, right? The 9-day novena is still a huge tradition.
So you've got this whole intricate system of beliefs. How did that actually show up in everyday life? Well, it was everywhere, in their myths, their belief in magic, and believe it or not, even in their own system of writing. The supernatural was just part of daily life. A dog howling could be an omen. People wore special amulets called ajumat for protection or special powers. And of course, there were all the stories about mythical creatures like the aswang and the tikbalang. creatures that, let's be honest, are still terrifying people in Filipino folklore and horror movies today.
And get this, they weren't just telling these stories, they were writing them down. They had their own ancient alphabet called Babian, and it was so elegant. With just 17 characters, 3 vowels, and 14 consonants, they had a whole sophisticated system for writing.
And the tools they used were so beautifully simple. They'd use a sharp metal point called a sepal to write, and they'd make their ink from plant sap. This wasn't just some primitive culture. This was a culture of poets, writers, and storytellers.
And their literature? Oh, it was incredibly rich. On one hand, you had poetry, things like proverbs and riddles that were packed with wisdom. And on the other hand, you had prose, all the folk tales, the myths, the legends about their gods and heroes and the world they lived in.
So, from their belief that every tree had a soul, all the way to their unique and beautiful writing system, we've seen just how much this unseen culture, this non-material world, really shaped everything for the ancient Filipinos.
And that really brings us to one final, fascinating question to think about. After all this time, after centuries of massive change, how much of this stuff still echoes in the Philippines today? How many of these beliefs about spirits, superstitions, and the sacredness of nature are still hanging around? The answers, just like back then, probably aren't in books. They're all around you.